Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Bitcoin Mentor Q&A. As always, I'm Ed behind the Live Free BTC handle. We got Nathan here today behind the Bitcoin Mentor handle. We also have Gary, who's part of Bitcoin Mentor up here. And today we have Scott Dedels. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's
As
Dedels.
our, it's Dedels?
Dedels.
Dedels. Okay, Scott Dedels. And if at any point anyone here would like to come up, ask a question, or join in on the conversation, we'd love to have you. But Scott, how you doing today? Everything going good?
Yeah, fabulously. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Gary, how you doing?
Doing fine here. On my way to pick up my kid as usual, so I'll probably be listening most of the time instead of talking, but I'm eager to hear what you got to say.
No worries. Yeah. Yeah, so Scott, maybe you could fill in everybody listening as people come in on your Bitcoin journey and some of the background that you have in the space.
Yeah, right on. I'm a class of 2020 grad. I have spent most of my career in compensation and rewards. Mostly pension plan consulting. So I had been doing that for about 15 years. Spent lockdown reading about economics and Austrian economics next, and then read Price of Tomorrow and Bitcoin Standard and a whole bunch of other books. Kind of orange pilled me right out of my entire way of thinking about the 60/40 portfolio and all of the sort of wealth preservation and retirement planning strategies I'd learned over the life of my career. And yeah, after that, I started really setting out to get involved with bringing Bitcoin into the workplace. I think it's like a super normal thing with Bitcoin that people, when they understand it, they immediately start to kind of like relate it to their own personal areas of expertise or interests. And I originally thought that kind of Bitcoin in the workplace had a place as being some kind of like pension insurance. I think that there's some people talking about the inherent problem that exists today around unfunded liabilities, and the percentage of pension portfolios that are made up of long duration assets and bonds. And but the more I went, kind of deeper down the rabbit hole, I think it makes so much sense that we have a kind of a blank slate to imagine how Bitcoin could be incorporated into, every aspect of how people get paid, get rewarded for work. So I started Block Rewards in the summer of 2023, and we are really trying to be kind of like a blank canvas, a company that really reimagines all kinds of ideas around where pay can go in the future with uncensorable money that is not restricted to the limitations of, the 9 to 5 business operating hours of the traditional financial system.
That's great. I love the story, and I know you mentioned in there that you read The Price of Tomorrow and that had an impact on you. And for me personally, I think that's like in my top three books. It's not even really a Bitcoin book, but just the topics it goes over, I think it really drives home the problem that we're trying to solve in Bitcoin, and it makes Bitcoin the obvious answer to it. So I love that, and I want you to definitely go into some more detail on block rewards. I'm curious what you guys are doing over there, and like the big picture stuff, and anything you'd like to share regarding the company.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you completely. I think like the reason I got initially recommended Price of Tomorrow, I wasn't looking for Bitcoin books, it doesn't even present as one. Jeff's ideas are just so kind of undeniable. I think he was onto something very early that people, whether they want to believe in Bitcoin or not, can understand. We actually just had Jeff out for an event locally where I live about a month ago. It was so cool to see him speak live, and yeah, the guy's a beast. Yeah, so block rewards, I think Yeah, I think that total compensation, benefits, all these things, there's sort of like two things going on that come to mind for me. One is we really haven't changed the way people have been paid to catch up to all the changes that have gone on with technology and society. This is something that really hasn't been disrupted. And part of that has to do with like the CRA and the IRS and rules around how people are paid. But I think like the genesis of the modern compensation model kind of goes all the way back to like Henry Ford. I mean, assembly line manufacturing and people really fronting the company, their time and energy over the course of, say, a 2-week pay interval, where during that time they have to pay to feed themselves, they have to pay to get themselves to work, they have to pay their, how they want to live. And then at the end of that time, they're reimbursed for the work they've done. And during that time, the company has been able to use that human capital to sort of finance the operations of the business. Um, so that's something that could be modernized in a big way. And I really think we just have to like consider all kinds of cool possibilities. There's like, outside of Bitcoin, there is a movement already to sort of like bring the event of compensation or reward closer in time to the moment the work is done. And, I think in the fiat world, this is just becoming something that people need because it's just getting more and more people are getting crunched to live paycheck to paycheck because money's so broken. And so in the pay world, most people aren't identifying Bitcoin as like, Bitcoin's a silver bullet to this problem. It's just that people don't really understand that. I think about, um, if you think about the evolution of what has happened for retirement planning over the last maybe 50 years, but definitely over the last 15, it's getting just more and more normal that people would be, completely in the market or like actually completely in stocks. And what's happened as money has really started to fail in its principal responsibilities of just being good money is that we have hybridized saving and gambling. So we used to actually have a percentage of our portfolio or a percentage of our assets were truly in savings vehicles that we weren't risking to grow. But as the rate of currency debasement accelerates, people's portfolio allocations have had to get progressively riskier. And this is also true of the pensions. Like you see big pension funds, Ontario Teachers famously took some big swings on, companies like FTX and had blowups. And everybody needs to figure out a way to solve this problem. The problem's already been solved. It's just using the Apex savings tool to, save your money and not risk it. And I think we're going to head into a time where this is what people start to finally understand, that this is what Bitcoin is for. And if that's right, if you have to spend all this time working, 40 hours, 50 hours, I work a lot. And then just to survive, you need to take some of that paycheck and gamble it so that it can grow in the future and hopefully support you as it grows. Then I think you might as well just cut some of that loop out and just start taking some or all as much of you can of your paycheck in a better form of money that doesn't require gambling for it to do what it's supposed to do. And so I think that there's a massive there's a massive win for anybody who can understand this, trying to just be live a more stressless life while managing the rigors of working full time. But it's a huge opportunity for employers. Companies need talent. Companies need to retain staff. They need people working productively instead of sitting at their desks stressing about how they're going to make financial ends meet. And Bitcoin is the silver bullet there too, right? It's so this is something that I just think we're kind of at the end of. It's funny because today everyone's talking about Microsoft debating whether or not they're going to add Bitcoin, and whether they do or don't, I really don't think it matters, because if they decide not to, there's still Amazon and Google and Chiquita Banana and whoever else. And, and think about all of the big companies in the world globally that exist that aren't headquartered in countries using the US dollar. So to me, I would be more interested in, Bombardier or, international organizations that reside in a jurisdiction where the money is already more broken than the US dollar. And for those companies, they already face the internal sort of enterprise risk, which nobody's really had to consider before because, I don't think like domestic currency as an operating cost has been something people have really been able to think about because inside country lines still, everyone is sort of like a captive user of a domestic fiat money. But corporations are different because I mean, Canada is a great example. If Amazon is going to come to Canada or not and bring, tens of thousands of jobs, that they have a material amount of like influence that the average person doesn't. So if a corporation decides that they need to start paying their staff in Bitcoin or managing some of their treasury in Bitcoin, this is going to be something that radically alters the bargaining position of central banks because it already today makes way more sense for Lululemon to be holding a Bitcoin on their balance sheet instead of whatever they're doing with Canadian dollars that aren't being put to work. So I'm shocked already that more C-suite thinkers haven't followed the Saylor playbook, and it might not be Microsoft, but companies are going to start doing it. I can guarantee it.
Yeah, and to that point, mentioned. Oh, did I cut out there?
Yeah,
I'm getting a phone call. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you go again, Ed. You're going a little underwater there for a second. Take it from the top.
All right. Yeah, so I found it interesting that in that report that everyone's kind of sharing around on the internet that Microsoft had, that they mentioned MicroStrategy and the performance of their stock price, and they quoted Bitcoin as being a part of that and part of the reasoning for them possibly switching over. And I have a ton of questions. I want to give Nathan a chance to jump in here because he just joined in, and we have Vangel up here too. So you guys can go ahead and ask something if you wanted to.
Well, I'm with you. I got a bunch of questions I want to ask as well too. But before we even go down that road, and then maybe I'll let you get to yours, or Angela, you get to yours. Scott, I'm really curious what you think the holdup is for corporate adoption. Why more people actually haven't followed this Saylor playbook, and is it, some of the ideas I've heard thrown around a lot are just simply that they're basically too much admin bureaucracy. They don't have basically a visionary leader at the helm. And for me personally, I even wonder how much of it is just generational until we have more of the millennials in those C-suite positions that we probably won't see more of the uptick. But I'd really love to know your thoughts, kind of boots on the ground. What are the hurdles that corporations just can't seem to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is maybe like this weird cognitive disconnect where it's, we're 15 years in, it's gone from 1 cent to whatever the price is today. And still a lot of people in positions of influence. And I kind of have people in my network who are executives at there's kind of 8 big financial companies in Canada. And I know leaders at many of them, and most of them are, I would say, Bitcoin skeptical. They're not even Bitcoin hesitant. It's like don't understand the properties which imbue the Bitcoin with value. They don't understand the potential, expansion of use cases. It's a very strange time, I think, where the light's going to go on for a lot of people all at once. I also kind of think there's a little bit of an issue with the tools that exist today. I don't know how many of them have been really geared towards companies. Like I see a lot of the excitement of development in the Bitcoin space around things that maybe don't have an obvious direct application for a company like Amazon. It's things like Nostr or Fedi. There's amazing things happening with the tech in Bitcoin, but the average corporation is like at Bitcoin 0. So, and this is part of what we're doing. I think there's a massive opportunity to build kind of kindergarten tools to help companies start to think about what does putting one toe in this thing actually look like? And I think this is what is kind of going on with Acropolis too. Like, what is the simplest way for companies to start thinking about holding some Bitcoin on their balance sheet? It's amazing, like how many smart business people that I've met in my travels who really just don't understand either A, that you can actually do that, or B, why you would actually want to do that. And yeah, the amount of companies that operate corporate real estate divisions as a side hustle to park their capital somewhere and protect it against inflation is so enormous. And downward pressure, like there's massive headwinds on that one asset class right now that I think on their own could really force companies to start to rethink what they're doing with their balance sheets. So but yeah, I think it's part of it has to do with tools. Like companies are going to need to be really handheld through this. Like I think in Bitcoin it can be easy to think this stuff is more obvious than it is. And it's pretty foreign still. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I forget that not everybody's hanging out on Nostr or Bitcoin Twitter. There's still a lot of education and knowledge to kind of spread amongst the general populace. Scott, just kind of quickly jumping to the other side of the coin there as well too. For the companies that you are working with, I'm curious which aspects of your offering are they kind of most interested in? Like where are you seeing the demand on that side? And then additionally, if there's any unifying characteristics between those companies that you have worked with, I imagine probably just got a Bitcoiner at the helm, but maybe there's something else I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, Bitcoin at the helm, or I say the two things that it's either been an either or so far is Bitcoiner at the helm or key recruit Bitcoiner that sort of wouldn't come on without some kind of offering. So that's something that I think is going to change a lot. It is like, companies as they kind of start to get more comfortable with the idea, and companies just care about, like getting the people they want and keeping the people they want and producing the results that they want. So if paying people in turnips help them do that, they would figure out a way to do it. Bitcoin's the apex financial tool that's ever been invented. So this stuff I think is like, again, I totally think we're at the tail end. Where we see the most success is voluntary participation programs. Like just have it be have this thing be available to your staff and have a mechanism that makes it kind of easy for people to know they can start to, buy Bitcoin through payroll if it's something that they want to do, and maybe offer some regular sessions on helping people understand why. Even like in Canada, the equivalent of like an IRA is called an RSP, and employers that offer this, even when there's free money involved, there's still typically only like a 60% uptake. Like people love giving free money away for some reason, if it involves some kind of a deduction off their paycheck. So I think that's just where I see this starting. And where I think it'll really change is if it's the psychological barrier of Bitcoin kind of cracking into six figures, or just like having another sort of high profile. This time around, it's going to be pretty difficult to think that Bitcoin's going to go from whatever number all the way to zero. Like at some point, it's going to have to be something that the average person. And I'm like, I love to make the example of. I was like a flip phone guy forever. Like I never thought I would get an iPhone, and I love my flip phone. I just didn't see that iPhones were going to take that over, and eventually they got me. And it's like this is the same thing. Like as awkward as setting yourself up a wallet might be, or these are things that people are just going to figure out.
It's funny. You were having a conversation the other day with Calvin from Choice in the US there, and he was saying something very similar in that there's just people have gotten so used to these passive flows through employers that they've got dead money just basically sitting there on the sidelines that I think they essentially just haven't taken control of or allocated, which they've always kind of had the opportunity to. Oh, that's fantastic. Vangel, did you have any questions for Scott or something you want to chime in on?
Yeah, well, circling back, I'm hoping Microsoft doesn't end up buying it, because that's going to, granted, it'd be great for Bitcoiners, but a lot of people, a lot of retail that doesn't have it yet, they're going to start getting very, very priced out. Not that you can never be completely priced out of Bitcoin. You can buy any fractional portion of one, but if Microsoft does, then Apple has to. And then one question I did have for Scott was, you mentioned Amazon not having a use case. The first thing that popped into my head, and I'm very not knowledgeable on this area, but when it comes to payments, at least whenever I buy something from Amazon, I always use a credit card. And I imagine that's probably most people. And I think there's a processing fee that Amazon probably eats in the back end there. So with something like Lightning Network for payments, would they be able to save that 2-3% per sale using something like Lightning and Bitcoin and the rails that go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Lightning guy. I think people who are bearish on Lightning, it's like we need to kind of like just take a pause here, deep breath, and realize that a sort of global payments network is being bootstrapped, like and sort of essentially like crowdsourced by just independent contributors and obviously some really advanced like developed organizations, but yeah, I mean, I see the future of, I think we're going to a place where everything is like streaming money on the L402 protocol, where you're streaming money in ways that are today kind of even hard to imagine. So, Lightning could enable you to pay as you go for individual shows on Netflix, where if you watch the first 8 minutes of a 30-minute show, your wallet is just being like, there are sats flowing out as that's going. And
but Scott, how could we possibly have terrible movies then if no one's going to buy them directly?
Imagine how they would have to actually, have a quality of everything. It's revolutionary ideas. There's a lot of like fiat, just fiat thinking that's going to need to catch up to this stuff too. And this is where I think, the iPhone example for me is always a good one, because it's not like iPhones existed and then the next day there was a robust app store with hundreds of thousands of apps. Like, you still need the market to catch up to what you can do with these technologies and how they're useful. So, the Lightning comes back to the same thing. Like, why can't we be being streamed money as we're working? And to me, that would be like the most motivating thing, is like, whether you're sort of in a commission sales role or even in labor, if you were today, if you need to if your employer needs you to come in 2 hours early for a shift, 2 weeks later you're going to see 2 hours extra on your paycheck less your deductions, and like that's just not really an effective motivation in the information age, where the average person will watch like 4 seconds of a TikTok, and if it doesn't catch their attention right away, they're going to swipe on to the next thing. So this is part of where I just think in general, money needs to start moving the same way we're used to everything else moving. And when companies understand, so back to the original question about this, yes, like this could impact every single aspect of how companies think about the way they do business, from the way they collect revenue from their customers to the way they pay it out to their employees.
Even just like jumping back for a second here too, I was trying to think about where adoption might come from. And I think I've read somewhere like more than 10% of the companies in the S&P 500 are just zombie companies. And I don't think Microsoft or any of the ones that are really profitable will necessarily feel the pain to make such a jump. But I could definitely see those bottom 10% that basically are just slowly bleeding out, making big plays, like putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet to try and recover, to try and actually make something happen and follow that MicroStrategy playbook. Scott, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that idea.
Totally. And I think what will happen is, by accident, this happens to a lot of people, right? You buy your first sats because you think its number go up and like it's how you're going to get rich. And then, 2 years later, you're eating only steak and eggs and you don't talk to any of your old friends anymore because they don't understand. So this can happen for companies too. And I think you'll see companies start thinking about Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and then they'll start understanding how being able to, have final settlement on a transaction can change how they think about moving money around the world, and what it could mean for protecting all of this money that companies are having to gamble their money right now too. So this idea of making saving great again, I think is something that can really just change the way enterprise thinks about operating models and managing capital, and like maybe reintroduce actual kind of like free market. Because the other thing is, like, as monetary debasement accelerates, it makes it harder for companies to compete on quality. Everything becomes, increasingly about delivering things for cheaper and faster, and that's like a market cycle that has a really, uninspiring endpoint. So I'm hopeful that there will be, as Microsoft, as MicroStrategy, whatever plays out over the next few years, and more companies kind of start to do the same, it should change the way they think about doing business in a way that's sort of like good for everybody.
Absolutely agree. By the way, if anybody in the audience wants to come up and ask a question or just riff on these ideas with us, we'd love to have you here. Benny, Shooter, AC, Mike, JB, I see you all fine folks hanging out in the audience. You're more than welcome. Ed, did you have anything that you want to ask or something you want to bring up?
Yeah, I love the conversation so far. I would like to ask you, Scott, what has been your most effective, in your opinion, method of getting these companies that you're working with to accept like the idea of Bitcoin, or maybe I should rephrase the question. Are the people that are coming to you and working with you already on board with Bitcoin? They understand it and they just need your help integrating it, or are you doing more of that like orange pilling experience? And is it more of like you're pushing onto them, or are you getting more like you getting more people coming to you? Does that make sense? I'm kind of like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's kind of the same. This would be the same for selling any product, but it's definitely true for Bitcoin. I think a lot of people get to the place where they kind of stop trying to proactively orange pill anyone. It's a pretty tricky thing to do. So I kind of got there after months later, I realized I wasn't getting invited to dinner parties anymore. Those unwanted, unsolicited conversations about Bitcoin. So I think that where we see a lot of success is where there is some interest already, and they're just trying to figure out how to do it. Like, those are really the ideal situations. Or tech progressive companies where they're familiar with kind of the concepts, but maybe they just need some help on the Bitcoin part. The other one where we've seen success, and this is just because we operate in Canada right now only, is with trucking companies. And for anybody who's not in Canada, the Canadian government, we had sort of like a national movement where the truckers across the country came together to help us sort of regain some liberty in Canada in February of 2022. And for that reason, there is a lot of trucking companies and truckers in Canada that value Bitcoin, because the government started freezing bank accounts for people who were involved in that movement, and Bitcoin was really a critical piece of technology that enabled them to keep that going as long as they could.
Yeah, and a follow-up to that too. I'm curious, with these companies and that you're working with, what of the products that you're offering or services that you're offering seems to be the most popular? Is it like the payroll, the different like benefits, or being able to just have that optionality of buying Bitcoin with their income?
Yeah. The most popular product for sure is just optional payroll purchase. We call it Bitcoin Savings Plan, and we really try to focus our messaging around helping people who are new to Bitcoin understand that this is a technology for saving. And I think that was part of my original interest in doing this and getting involved in helping Bitcoin get ingested by the workplace. Is it's actually pretty difficult helping employers figure out how to onboard mainstream financial products. Like, everybody kind of knows what a pension is, as an example, but actually onboarding employees or rolling out a new pension requires a humongous amount of education and road mapping. And these are things that, like, we've grown up with our whole lives. So So Bitcoin is just, I think it really needs to be treated that way. And this is part of, like, going back to what I was saying about, there's a massive amount of legs in the Bitcoin world behind the tech and helping develop things that need to exist for adoption to continue. But I think we also in Bitcoin like really need businesses that exist in the regular world today and help everyone else kind of like come along. Like when I think about, like, what are the things that will grow adoption over time, and one of them is people just earning some Bitcoin. Like you want people to spend Bitcoin. Are you more likely to spend something that you bought as like a possession, or something that you earned, like there's something that you spent your time earning, and that's what you do with that money, is you spend it. So I think it's almost unreasonable to expect people to spend something that they bought hoping it would go up in price. Like that's just a little bit of a disconnect. So yeah.
That's a very interesting insight there, Scott. I never thought of that before, but even in my own experience, you're absolutely right, because I have the earned and the bought in different piles, and I've only ever spent from one of them, and I didn't even put that together.
Totally.
That it was just psychologically, it's like, oh yeah, I earned that. I need to buy some beef, so here you go, no problem. Wow,
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really going to think on that one for a bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I like Nathan, I kind of relate to that as well. Like I think that there's a psychological component to buying something and holding it, as opposed to like the money you're earning at your job, or if you're earning Bitcoin as payment. Yeah, and one of the things that I'm interested in, and I'll give a quick little spoiler, I am currently working on a project to orange pill the businesses in my local city, and for like trying to create a formal proposal to hand out to these people, and mostly the business owners, but targeting like the businesses as well as the employees, because I want people to, I think everyone in the Bitcoin space wants people to have the advantages of sound hard money. And I'm just curious, I love what you guys are doing. And if you guys were available in the US, I would 100% be recommending you'd be in there, because that would be like the perfect, hey, look, here you go. Just hand them over to these guys, and they could take care of like these payroll needs or whatever that you guys might want as a business. But on that note, maybe just for my own personal mission, I'm curious what advice you'd have for maybe just talking to a business and getting them, like someone that's obviously interested in Bitcoin already, because I totally agree that someone that isn't ready to like dive into Bitcoin and has no idea why they would even want it isn't going to be accepting of it right away, and it might require more work. But if you have anything to comment on that, I'd be glad to hear it.
Oh yeah, I think I typically try to talk to and that it depends on who your touch point in the business is, I guess it would be my thought, because they're going to be sensitive to the different, people already understand that money's broken, and like I think everybody's kind of observing this in their own way. If you're in purchasing in a business, you're seeing input costs go up. If you're working in payroll, you're hearing the complaints that people aren't making enough money. If you're an executive, you're seeing a compression of margins. So I think that there is what's wild about it. I think everybody has a similar experience learning about Bitcoin, is like how poorly understood money actually is, the concept of money. And so I really try to relate when I'm talking to businesses, the properties of money and the properties of Bitcoin as a form of money, and anything that I can do to highlight how some of Bitcoin's properties as a money could be useful for the business. So that could mean different things, like when we have, and like a low hanging one would be countries that do either international purchasing or have employees in other countries. Have two like really easy to understand use cases for Bitcoin, because moving money through the SWIFT system is like just everybody understands that this is a really old and frustrating and expensive way of moving money. And also, I think for U.S. businesses, one of the challenges I would imagine is that the U.S. dollar is kind of the best functioning fiat money in the world, and so this problem is less obvious. I was having this conversation earlier today with Raj at Sony. It's like businesses in other countries actually should be, like you should see more corporate Bitcoin balance sheet strategies in Argentina before you start seeing other, QQQ companies taking this on, because the problem is just way more urgent and obvious elsewhere. But yeah, so I think, if you have businesses, if it's smaller and local businesses, that's where it's trickier. And like people see the volatility on shorter time frames, and this is a kind of a common objective that is easy for people to start thinking about. Well, how would we manage that on our business? And this is where, as a counter, like I think it's helpful to help businesses think about the different things they might be able to do with it. And investment in commercial real estate is one that I love to talk about, because this is another one that businesses, are commonly involved in and are already starting to kind of see the engine lights blinking on the dashboard, like this isn't doing what it's supposed to. I was talking to a guy this morning who has a cleaning business, and they own a few buildings on the side, and all of those buildings have gone cash flow negative because they can't find tenants. And actually, at the same time, the appraised value of the property has also gone down, while the property taxes have gone way up. And so it's like they're not alone. This is something that's happening at a sort of a macro level or asset class level. So that can be potentially one wedge that's good. And we're hoping to have an announcement about getting into the U.S. in 2025, as just to put a bow on that. We're working hard trying to. It's an interesting thing trying to navigate operating in multiple jurisdictions as a Bitcoin business, and making that happen. So.
Isn't that so terrible that it's so easy to move Bitcoin across borders, but just getting the business part set of it is just a goddamn nightmare?
Yeah.
Props to you guys for making it happen. Scott, I'm kind of curious on the almost like logistics of it. So if Block Rewards was working with my employer and we were doing the savings plan, is that Bitcoin then being directly sent to pre-identified wallets of the employees, or is the employer taking care of distribution after the amount too? And then kind of on that same note, how are you guys thinking about UTXOs for these benefit plans and for the savings as well too?
Yeah, the dust UTXOs is a concern, and we try to help that along with education as best as we can, and offering content around UTXO management. So to hop back, employers are not holding any Bitcoin. They're all direct to employee wallets. I see the future state of this whole thing, and this might take quite a while. This might be, Block Rewards in 2040, but I imagine that in the future, in the not too distant future, companies will be paying their staff in Bitcoin out of their own Bitcoin, out of their own sort of like corporate wallets. And that will just be something, again, this is an idea that makes complete sense to me, is we have the technology now for the financial relationship between the employee and the employer to not need a middleman, like an institution in the middle. So it shouldn't need to take 2 weeks to get paid. And there shouldn't be sort of like charges on either end. All that's kind of required are the tools to manage the reporting and the accounting of it all. So that's kind of like my big vision of where this could go over time. Is I just think everyone's going to be streaming money. The expectation will be that all sort of transactions are direct, kind of like peer to peer, wallet to wallet, and but today it's not there, and so thankfully, then this is why we are where we are. We're sort of like really in this space of like we want to be Bitcoin kindergarten for companies and helping their staff like in the most accessible way possible. So yeah.
And quickly before we go to Angela here as well too, I just want to follow up. And what are some of the advantages that someone might have from using something like Block Rewards versus just taking their paycheck and buying it on their own after the fact?
I mean, I think that the biggest one is behavior. So people do. If you have something coming off your pay stub as a deduction and you never actually see the money, and this has nothing to do with Bitcoin and everything to do with just how people are, like human psychology. If you have a forced way to pay yourself first, you're going to pay yourself first. So that's kind of part one. Part two is that structure enables us to allow employers to start thinking about it as an incentive. So if they want to, match whatever amount that you've committed to taking off your paycheck, or start thinking about paying out your quarterly bonuses or year-end bonuses in Bitcoin, or storing those bonuses, averaging those bonuses in and paying them out in Bitcoin at year-end, accrued pay. There are lots of different things that we do in the old world, in the regular pay world, that Bitcoin offers like the opportunity to just really get creative and create more value for your staff. But even just like basics, like if you're, I'm kind of a smash buy guy, but like if you're diligent in averaging in over time, this is something there where $100 a paycheck over a 4-year period is going to end up being a pretty significant amount of money. I mean, if you had been doing this over the last 4 years, you would have a lot of money right now. And I think this is where it's the idea of like, 50 years ago, and people would go to the same job all for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, pay into something, and then have that certainty for the future. They could reliably count on that thing to be there for them where they needed that in the future. And I think that Bitcoin, that's part of what this is this is a way for people to kind of reclaim some ability to plan for the future with certainty financially.
That's awesome. Vangel, sorry, I interrupted you there. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Actually, you kind of tied into my question a little bit there with your answer, Scott, because I was going to ask, first comment, I find that even the people that I have orange pilled, teaching them the principle of paying yourself first, something I picked up from The Richest Man in Babylon, great book if the audience hasn't dabbled with that. But just the concept of, hey, when you get your paycheck, just take this percentage or this much off and pay yourself. It's like a psychological thing. Like you think you need the money, you're strapped for it, but as soon as you do that and move it into a savings vehicle or something that you're not going to touch or spend, you suddenly find that, oh, I can get by without this portion of my paycheck. But then my question to you is, based on what you said, when the employer could pay you on like, instead of biweekly or whatever time period, they can pay during the day with Bitcoin, what effects do you think that would have on like the way people spend and view money if they can get paid on a daily basis? And one thing that comes to mind is credit and the use of credit cards, where you don't need to wait for your paycheck in 2 weeks and then pay that you used during the time in between and paid on it. What do you think that's going to do to the consumer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think my thoughts are, and this is going to take some time, but fiat money in general, all fiat money and money products are kind of our credit. Like a fiat dollar is like it has value based on the premise of like the issuance of future debt. So I think when you think about earning Bitcoin and receiving a final settlement as payment, and it's a bearer instrument, and so the thing that you receive is the actual thing of value. my thought is that we move back as a society eventually to this place where people are no longer borrowing everything from the future to pay for things that they want to have now, and we are just paying for things that we can afford now. And like, that's going to be probably a tricky place to get to, because the amount of leverage and debt that has accumulated in the system. But I'm also a really big chondritive wave guy, for anybody who's interested in like in K-wave theory, and this is kind of an economic model that came out of Russia, I think in the 30s, studying 60 to 80-year patterns of the accumulation of debt relative to the price of money, and the expansion and contraction of credit. And I think is he going to go? We can either expand the bubble forever, or the bubble's going to have to pop. And in my mind, I think that the realistic outcome is that as this bubble pops, what is going to be valuable is money, where the settlement is final and the value of the money is actually in the money itself, and not in the issuance of future debt. So that was a super like long-winded. I hope that made sense. Like, yeah, I think that people are going to stop wanting to work for the promise of future debt, and they would rather take the money that's worth something today, right now.
Do you also think that that regardless of them getting paid more often, their spending will decrease and become less consumer-based economy, on the fact that the money inherently appreciates over time as human productivity grows? Or do you think we'll still have those kind of impulsive, like FOMO spending on experiences and consumer goods that we see today?
Yeah, I mean, I might separate all those two, because I think like we should be experiencing. Experiences to me are the things you want to spend your money on. I can totally see. I mean, the other thing is, AI and robotics automation is going to really transform the workplace a lot over the next, let's say, 18, 36 months. And so the way we think about products, like the products that we consume, I think is going to change with that. And this is kind of getting back to the conversation earlier about Jeff Booth and Price of Tomorrow. And they're like, at some point, we're going to have to be able to square away the abundance of productivity that's happening versus the actual like cost of things in the pieces of paper we're using. So, I mean, at the same time, there's just people who are never going to change. Like, everybody has that friend that can't help themselves and gets the dopamine rush from spending money. But I think the market research around time preference amongst our small segment of Bitcoiners is pretty conclusive. Like, if you do understand on some level that your money will become more valuable if you don't spend it, you're much less likely to waste it. So if that behavior becomes contagious, I think then the only thing that can happen is successful companies will have to jump onto that trend and start competing with each other based on quality, and like all of a sudden people may be willing to wait for things if they knew, like, if you had to wait 2 years for a fridge that you knew was going to be the last refrigerator you were ever going to have to buy, you would probably be willing to wait for it. And I think that, so yeah, I think that's kind of where it could go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, I mean, might be a side tangent, but the idea of Gresham's law, the people are going to spend the bad money. And I think that you totally hit the nail on the head there. Like, ever since I understood Bitcoin, it clicked with me. I just much rather earn Bitcoin. Like, I just completely, instead of having to get my dollars and then buy Bitcoin with it, I'd rather just get that Bitcoin straight from my employer and then save it, spend it. And like you said, like, it does instill a bit of patience and the just the ability to know that this is going to be more valuable in the future. They can't debase me. It makes you value your time. You appreciate going to work more. You know that the money that you're earning is going to actually get you ahead in life down the road. And I think that all of those things really come together and give a lot of hope to people, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing, giving people that opportunity through their employers. I think that's a great business model you got going there. I did have a couple questions as we get to the top of the hour. Is there would you care to share any like future plans that you have or some bigger visions that you have for your company? We're kind of curious to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, so I sort of, without it, with no disrespect to anybody who's in the market already, like I sort of like, so I view earning Bitcoin as a just massive opportunity market, because I personally am a hyper Bitcoinization person. I hope it happens in our lifetime. I feel like it's going to happen a lot sooner than people think it will. For a hyper Bitcoinized world to exist, everybody will have to earn Bitcoin. So that means that, or everybody who's planning on working. So there's lots of space for competition in that sort of like niche. And my biggest dream or vision is that we emerge as the company that really figured it out. And I think that there's companies that have been doing this for a long time and have had lots of success globally. But I think what you see a lot in this space is sort of like Bitcoin agnostic strategies, where there's a lot of tether happening, tether payroll happening, borderly, and there's lots of appetite internationally for people to be able to get easy access to US dollars, which still also makes tons of sense to me. But I think we're moving to a time over the next, let's say by 2040, 2045, where we don't actually even call it Bitcoin anymore. We just call it money. And that technology has integrated into society fully. And so like as we get more technologies that enable us to interact with Bitcoin, to spend Bitcoin, to borrow against Bitcoin, to earn Bitcoin, like this will unfold in my mind in the same way that like the internet did over the last kind of 20 years. And like, I'm 44. I was 12 when we got the internet. It was like the dial-up, and then I went through that. I went through downloading one photo at a time, and it took an hour to download a photo, and then it's kind of like the static web pages turning into like some the early days of online retail. And like this is very much what I think this process is exactly happening again right now. And it's just kind of, we live in this society where if things aren't instant, they're not happening. So it's like people are hesitant to think that this is what's going on right now, even though for me, I feel like it is. So maybe, I imagine a world where every company has their own treasury of Bitcoin, and they pay their employees from that Bitcoin, but they will need help managing the how of how that works. And I think that's kind of like the end state, is like in a decentralized future. The future isn't gatekeeping intermediaries. It is tools that enable the fluidity of the streaming of money.
That's great. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I don't think that it, like some people think that this could take, a lifetime, maybe a century for Bitcoin to play out. And I am totally of the opposite mind. I've seen it. I'm only 30, but I've seen the transformation of technology in my life as a kid to this point, and things like the internet or just even like video games and like personal tech has just evolved so much, and it's really crazy to see it. And I think Bitcoin's just at that early phase where it's finding its niche, and it's finding its the tools are being built, and we're going to see that evolve very rapidly, and just as it's just going to exponentially increase as more people get in here. But I'd like to also ask you if you're excited about anything in the Bitcoin space, if there's anything that's kind of like caught your eye, maybe a hardware wallet or some just news or developments that you've seen. I correct me if I'm wrong, but did you attend the Learning BTC conference?
Yeah, I did. It was awesome. Super cool to see how many Bitcoin events are going on right now. And for as a like Victoria, British Columbia is a city of like 400,000 people. There was a full day event, very well attended. So Yeah, that part's really cool. I am really interested in L402. I think there is an underappreciated collision course we're headed for between Lightning and artificial intelligence and agents and all of this stuff that's happening with autonomous workflow that's going to be happening through AI. To me, like yeah, and it's changing so fast. So all of the advancements that are happening around things like Claude, where it's 6 months ago it was a tool that could help you do some basic coding, and now it can actually take over your computer and do the coding and store your files for you, and like in another 6 months you'll just be able to like talk to it. You're not even going to need to type. And like right alongside that, this architecture for moving money at a speed that these AI intelligences are going to want to are going to need is also being built. That's the thing I think is most exciting, because for me, like Bitcoin is the thing that prevents like the Terminator 2 future, because it is the that's the apex of the Jeff Booth theory, is that Bitcoin is this tool that enables us to sort of properly harness the abundance from technology, instead of it, turning us into this sort of like surveillance state dystopia. So, I'm bullish on, like, that's why I think L402 is a critical piece of innovation in helping us be ready for the AI economy that's like right around the corner.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what a rabbit hole to go down too. I mean, I totally agree with that. I think that Bitcoin, and the proof of work behind the way the network runs prevents, like you said, the ability for AIs to completely dominate us. Like they wouldn't be able to have any outsized power over Bitcoin than we would. It requires energy at the end of the day. And I think that that's such a powerful way of framing it. And also, like you said, like the money aspect, as AI creates deflationary pressure by doing things like that, where it's able to control your computer and just create apps and do all these things for you without even having to touch a key, it's going to create lots of value. But if you lose your job and you don't have money that can appreciate with that increase in productivity that the broader economy is experiencing, then you're going to get left behind. And unfortunately, I don't think the central banks and the governments really have anything. They're not really doing anything to look out for you in that kind of a situation. So as time has shown. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I'm really enjoyed the conversation today. Do you want to leave people with where they can find you? Any of that information or resources?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks again for having me on. I'm on Twitter probably more than I need to be. The handle Lantern Bitcoin. We have the Block Reward podcast, which is on all the platforms. And Block Reward is me, and it's an interview-based pod. If you haven't checked it out, we have different guests on every Tuesday. Have had I think the show has really hit a nice stride. This week's guest is Bob Burnett, coming on Tuesday, and that episode is really going to be worth a listen. I'm on LinkedIn and blockrewards.ca.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate you coming up, and everybody in the audience, make sure you give Scott a follow and the Block Rewards account a follow as well. And you can give me and the BTC Mentor handle a follow if you want to stay up to date with when we run the spaces. We do them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. We also have Vangel and Gary up here. They're part of Bitcoin Mentor, so make sure to give them a follow. And if you want to learn more about Bitcoin Mentor, you can visit bitcoinmentor.io and email one of us, book a free session, and chat with us on how we can help you with your Bitcoin journey. Anything from self-custodying a Bitcoin, buying, selling, running a node, multi-sig, all that good stuff. We'd love to help you out. And with that, I hope everyone has a great day and enjoys their weekend. We will be back here on Monday to talk again. Take care, guys.
Thanks again.